The golden hues of autumn stretched across the small New England town of Norwich, its streets lined with sugar maples whose leaves burned in fiery shades of orange and red. It was the kind of picturesque place people dreamt of retiring to, quiet, charming, and steeped in history. For Amanda and her husband, Michael, this town was supposed to represent a fresh start. Amanda Jennings had always been the kind of woman who turned heads. Not in the flashy, obvious way, but in the way that demanded a second glance, the kind of beauty that seemed effortless. Her warm hazel eyes and dimpled smile could make strangers feel like old friends. Yet, beneath that radiant exterior, Amanda had become a woman wrestling with the weight of discontent. Her days as a high-powered publicist in bustling Manhattan had been traded for quiet afternoons tending to a garden she didn't love and evenings in a creaky colonial home that smelled faintly of cedar and regret. Michael, on the other hand, was the steady rock Amanda thought she needed when they first met. A software engineer by trade, he was thoughtful, reliable, and maddeningly logical. He thrived in routines, the kind of man who kept an inventory of his sock drawer. Where Amanda craved excitement, Michael sought consistency, a quality she'd initially admired but now found stifling. And yet, there was no denying that Michael adored her, even as the spark in their relationship had dimmed into the slow flicker of domestic monotony. It had been Amanda's idea to move to Norwich. After a particularly grueling year, filled with long hours, corporate backstabbing, and a miscarriage that neither she nor Michael fully knew how to process. She proposed the change as a way to heal. They sold their sleek Manhattan apartment, bought the sprawling colonial on Maplewood Lane, and promised each other they'd build something new, something better. But new beginnings were rarely as simple as moving boxes and a change of scenery. The quiet that Amanda had once longed for now felt oppressive, her days stretching endlessly while Michael dove headfirst into remote work. She tried to fill her time with yoga classes, book clubs, and volunteering at the local animal shelter, but none of it felt like her. That's where Jason came in. Jason Ramsey had the kind of rugged charm that seemed plucked straight from a Nicholas Sparks novel. He was the town's handyman, the guy everyone called when their roof leaked or their porch sagged. At 35, he was just a few years older than Amanda, with salt and pepper hair that framed a face weathered by years of working under the sun. He exuded an effortless confidence, the kind that came from knowing who you were and not pretending to be anything else. The first time Amanda met Jason was at the Norwich Farmers Market. She'd been lugging a basket of pumpkins back to her car when the handle snapped, sending the gourds tumbling across the parking lot. Jason had appeared seemingly out of nowhere, his calloused hands scooping up the runaway pumpkins with ease. "Need a hand?" he asked, his deep voice laced with amusement. From that moment on, Jason seemed to show up everywhere. He was there fixing the squeaky hinge on the door of the library where Amanda volunteered, replacing a cracked window at the animal shelter, and, most recently, installing a new fence around the Jennings backyard. Each interaction was brief but left an impression. An easy laugh, a fleeting touch, a shared glance that lingered a little too long. Michael, of course, was oblivious. His days were consumed by Zoom meetings and coding marathons, leaving little room for anything else. He loved Amanda, but his way of showing it had become more about paying the mortgage and less about passion. Amanda couldn't remember the last time Michael had noticed her new haircut, let alone the way she'd started wearing perfume again, the same floral scent she'd worn back when they first started dating. It was a crisp Tuesday morning when the first real crack appeared in the delicate facade of Amanda's life. Jason was in the backyard, finishing up the fence installation. Amanda had brought him a glass of iced tea, a small courtesy she'd extended a few times before, though today felt different. There was something unspoken between them, a tension that made the air feel thicker than it should have. "You didn't have to do that," Jason said, accepting the glass with a grateful nod. "Consider it a bribe to finish before winter sets in," Amanda quipped, her smile more playful than she intended. Jason chuckled, taking a long sip. His eyes locked onto hers over the rim of the glass, and for a moment, the world around them seemed to pause. Amanda's heart raced in a way it hadn't in years, her chest tightening with a mix of exhilaration and guilt. She quickly averted her gaze, pretending to fuss with the cuffs of her sweater. "You've got a good thing here," Jason said, his voice softer now. The house, the husband. It's a life most people dream of. Amanda's laugh came out sharper than she intended. Dreams aren't always what they seem. Jason's expression shifted, his easy smile fading into something more serious. You deserve to be happy, Amanda, whatever that looks like. The words lingered long after Jason left that afternoon. Amanda replayed the conversation in her head, dissecting every word, every look, every unspoken implication. She hated the way she felt. Excited, alive, and undeniably drawn to a man who wasn't her husband. But she couldn't deny the thrill, the way Jason seemed to see her in a way Michael hadn't in years. That evening, as Michael sat hunched over his laptop, Amanda tried to muster the courage to tell him how she was feeling. Not about Jason, but about the growing void between them. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she asked if he wanted more coffee. Sure, Michael said without looking up, his focus entirely on the screen. Amanda poured the coffee, her mind churning with thoughts she couldn't seem to escape. She knew she was standing on the edge of something dangerous, but the pull of it was undeniable. And so the stage was set. For Amanda, the quiet town of Norwich was no longer a haven. It was a pressure cooker, and the cracks in her seemingly perfect life were about to splinter into something much larger. Amanda's days in Norwich began to take on a rhythm that felt like walking a tightrope. On the surface, she went about her usual routines. Morning coffee with Michael, volunteering at the animal shelter, and tending to the garden she still didn't care much for. But beneath it all, her mind was consumed by the growing connection with Jason. It was the way he looked at her like she wasn't just another piece of the furniture in her own life. She hated how much she craved that attention, yet every stolen glance and lingering conversation left her wanting more. It wasn't long before those innocent exchanges in the backyard turned into something more. Jason started showing up unexpectedly, always with a convenient reason, like double-checking the fence's stability or delivering a new landscaping estimate. Amanda didn't question it, but she knew exactly why he kept coming back. She felt it too. One afternoon, as the autumn leaves crunched underfoot, Amanda found herself walking through the park in town. It was one of her favorite spots, with winding trails and a small duck pond that glistened under the sun. She was surprised to see Jason there, leaning casually against a bench with a coffee in hand. "Fancy seeing you here," he said with a grin that made her stomach flip. Amanda hesitated for a moment before walking over. "You stalking me now?" Jason chuckled. "Not my style, just enjoying the weather. Care to join me?" They sat together, the conversation flowing effortlessly as always. Jason talked about his latest projects, and Amanda found herself sharing stories about her time in Manhattan, something she rarely did anymore. It felt good to laugh again, to let down the guard she didn't even realize she'd been holding up for so long. "You ever think about going back?" Jason asked, his tone curious but gentle. Amanda shook her head. "Not really. Michael and I moved here to get away from all that. But sometimes, I miss who I was back then." Jason tilted his head, studying her. "And who are you now?" The question hung in the air, heavier than Amanda expected. She didn't have an answer, not one she wanted to admit, anyway. As the weeks passed, the tension between Amanda and Jason continued to build, reaching a point where neither of them could deny what was happening. The small moments they shared, a hand brushing against hers, a knowing glance from across a room, began to feel electric. And yet, Amanda couldn't bring herself to cross that invisible line. Not yet. But everything came to a head one crisp November evening. Michael had been distant lately more than usual. His work had become all-consuming, and Amanda felt like a ghost in her own marriage. That night, as she set the table for dinner, she decided it was time to confront him. If they were going to fix this, if there was anything left to fix, they needed to start talking. "Michael," she began, her voice steady but firm. "Can we talk? About us?" Michael looked up from his laptop, his expression puzzled. "Sure. What's on your mind?" Amanda hesitated, the words catching in her throat. How could she explain everything she was feeling? The loneliness, the resentment, the way Jason had started to fill the void Michael had left. Instead, she took a deep breath and said, I just feel like we've been drifting apart. I want to feel close to you again. Michael frowned, closing his laptop. I didn't realize you felt that way. Work's been a lot lately, but I'm doing it for us, Amanda. To give us a good life. I know, Amanda said, her voice softening, but it doesn't feel like we're living it together anymore. For a moment, Michael looked like he wanted to say something more, but instead, he just nodded. I'll try to do better, he said simply. It wasn't the resolution Amanda had hoped for, but it was something, a small step forward. Or at least, that's what she told herself as they ate dinner in near silence. The next day, Amanda ran into Jason at the coffee shop downtown. It was pure coincidence, at least that's what she told herself. She was there to pick up a latte, and he was there to grab a quick bite before heading to his next job. But the moment their eyes met, Amanda felt her resolve waver. Hey, Jason said, his smile warm and familiar. Mind if I join you? They sat at a corner table, the conversation easy as always. But this time, there was a tension neither of them could ignore. Jason leaned in slightly, his voice low as he said, You know, you don't have to keep pretending. Amanda frowned. Pretending what? That you're happy, Jason said. That this life is enough for you. Amanda's breath caught in her throat. She opened her mouth to respond, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she stared at her coffee, her mind racing. Was he right? Had she been pretending all along? I can see it in your eyes, Jason continued. You're searching for something, Amanda. Something more. Before she could stop herself, Amanda looked up and met his gaze. And in that moment, she felt seen in a way she hadn't in years. I don't know what I'm doing, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Jason reached across the table, his hand brushing against hers. Then let me help you figure it out. The moment was interrupted by the sound of Amanda's phone buzzing. It was Michael, his name flashing on the screen. She pulled her hand away, suddenly aware of how close she and Jason had been. I should go, she said quickly, grabbing her coat. Jason didn't stop her, but the look in his eyes told her everything she needed to know. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. That evening, as Amanda sat on the couch next to Michael, her mind kept drifting back to Jason. She hated herself for it, but she couldn't help wondering what her life might look like if she had the courage to walk away. The line between right and wrong was becoming increasingly blurred, and Amanda knew she was inching closer to a decision she couldn't take back. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more gripping stories like this one. Stay tuned as we uncover what happens next in Amanda's journey. The days following Amanda's encounter with Jason were a haze of conflicting emotions. On the one hand, she couldn't ignore the pull she felt toward him, the way he made her feel alive in a way she hadn't felt in years. On the other, guilt gnawed at her every time she looked at Michael. She had made a vow, for better or for worse, and walking away from that vow felt like stepping into uncharted territory. But Amanda wasn't the only one feeling the shift. Michael had started to notice the way her attention drifted during their conversations, the way she seemed distant even when she was sitting right beside him. He wasn't sure what was going on, but he knew something had changed. And for a man who prided himself on control, that realization was deeply unsettling. One evening, Michael decided to confront her. Amanda, he began, his voice steady but laced with tension. Is there something you're not telling me? Amanda froze, her heart pounding in her chest. What do you mean? She asked, feigning innocence. You've been different lately, Michael said, his eyes searching hers. Distant. I feel like I don't know what's going on in your head anymore. Amanda opened her mouth to respond, but the words caught in her throat. She wanted to tell him the truth, that she felt trapped, that she was struggling to find herself again. But instead, she said, I've just been stressed. It's nothing. Michael didn't look convinced, but he nodded. If you say so, he said quietly, turning his attention back to his laptop. Amanda felt a wave of relief, but it was short-lived. She knew this wasn't the end of the conversation, just a temporary reprieve. Meanwhile, Jason was growing restless. He had tried to respect Amanda's boundaries, But the more time they spent apart, the more he realized how much he wanted to be with her. He couldn't shake the memory of their last conversation. The way her eyes had softened when she admitted she didn't know what she was doing. He wanted to be the one to help her figure it out, but he also knew that pushing too hard could drive her away. One afternoon, Jason decided to take a risk. He showed up at Amanda's house unannounced, his heart pounding as he rang the doorbell. When Amanda opened the door, her eyes widened in surprise. "Jason," she said, her voice a mixture of shock and curiosity. "What are you doing here?" "I needed to see you," he said simply. "Can we talk?" Amanda hesitated, glancing over her shoulder to make sure Michael wasn't home. "Come in," she said finally, stepping aside to let him in. They sat in the living room, the tension between them palpable. Jason leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees as he looked at her. "I can't stop thinking about you," he admitted, his voice low and earnest. "I know this is complicated, but I need you to know how I feel." Amanda's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to tell him she felt the same way, but fear held her back. Instead, she said, "Jason, this isn't fair. To me, to you, to Michael. None of this is fair." "I know," Jason said, his gaze unwavering. "But sometimes, life isn't fair. Sometimes you have to fight for what you want." Amanda's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what I want," she whispered. Jason reached out and took her hand, his touch sending a shiver down her spine. "Yes, you do," he said gently. "You're just afraid to admit it." Before Amanda could respond, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway sent a jolt of panic through her. She pulled her hand away and stood up quickly. "You need to go," she said urgently. Jason nodded, his expression somber. "I'll wait for you, Amanda, as long as it takes." As he left through the back door, Amanda felt a pang of longing mixed with guilt. She knew she was standing at a crossroads, and whichever path she chose would change her life forever. That evening, Michael noticed the tension in Amanda's demeanor. She was quiet during dinner, barely touching her food. He decided to take a different approach, hoping to get through to her. "Let's go away this weekend," he suggested. "Just the two of us. We could use some time to reconnect." Amanda hesitated. Part of her wanted to say yes, to give their marriage another chance. But another part of her felt like it was already too late. "Okay," she said finally, forcing a smile. "That sounds nice." Michael seemed relieved, and for a moment, Amanda felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this trip could be a fresh start for them. Maybe she could find a way to let go of Jason and focus on rebuilding her life with Michael. The weekend getaway was idyllic on the surface. A charming bed and breakfast nestled in the countryside, complete with cozy fireplaces and stunning views. But beneath the picturesque exterior, the cracks in Amanda and Michael's relationship were impossible to ignore. Michael tried to engage her in conversation, reminiscing about their early days together and sharing his dreams for the future. But Amanda's responses were short and distracted, her thoughts constantly drifting back to Jason. On their second evening, as they sat by the fire with glasses of wine, Michael finally confronted her. "Amanda, I need to know the truth," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "Is there someone else?" Amanda's heart stopped. She had been dreading this moment, but now that it was here, she realized she couldn't keep lying. "Yes," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "There is." Michael's face fell, and for a moment, he looked like he had been physically struck. "How long?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not long," Amanda said quickly. "Nothing has happened, nothing physical anyway. But I have feelings for him." Michael stared at her, his expression a mixture of anger and heartbreak. "Why?" he asked. "What did I do wrong?" Tears streamed down Amanda's face. "It's not about you," she said. "It's about me. I feel like I've lost myself, Michael. And Jason. He makes me feel seen." Michael stood up abruptly, pacing the room. "So what now?" he demanded. "Are you going to leave me for him?" "I don't know," Amanda admitted, her voice barely audible. "I don't know what to do." Michael shook his head, his hands clenched into fists. "You need to figure it out, Amanda. Because I can't keep living like this. He left the room, slamming the door behind him, and Amanda collapsed onto the couch, her body racked with sobs. She knew she had reached the point of no return, and whatever happened next, there was no going back to the way things were. When they returned home, the tension between Amanda and Michael was palpable. They barely spoke, each lost in their own thoughts. Amanda knew she needed to make a decision, but the weight of it felt overwhelming. Jason, meanwhile, had been waiting patiently, or as patiently as he could manage. When Amanda finally called him, asking to meet, he felt a surge of hope. They agreed to meet at the park where they had first spent time together, a place that now felt like neutral ground. As they sat on the bench, Jason could see the turmoil in Amanda's eyes. "You don't have to say anything," he said gently. "Just tell me how you feel." Amanda took a deep breath, her hands trembling. "I don't know if I'm ready to leave my marriage," she admitted. "But I also can't stop thinking about you." Jason nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I'm not asking you to make a decision right now," he said. "I just want you to know that I'm here for you, no matter what." For the first time in weeks, Amanda felt a sense of clarity. She didn't have all the answers, but she knew she couldn't keep living in limbo. She needed to confront her fears head-on, even if it meant risking everything. As she and Jason parted ways, Amanda felt a flicker of hope. The road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was finally taking control of her life. Stay tuned for the next chapter as we explore the fallout from Amanda's decision and the explosive events that will bring her journey to its dramatic conclusion. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more captivating stories like this one. The days following Amanda's confession felt like a quiet storm brewing on the horizon. Both she and Michael moved through the house like ghosts, their interactions stilted and strained. Every glance exchanged carried the weight of unspoken questions. Michael, once the steady rock of their relationship, seemed lost, while Amanda teetered on the edge of a decision that would forever alter the course of their lives. But the real turning point came late one evening when Michael, after a day of simmering silence, found himself consumed by curiosity. While Amanda was out grocery shopping, he opened her laptop, his fingers hesitating over the trackpad before searching through her recent emails and messages. It didn't take long for him to find the threads connecting her to Jason, emails filled with lingering words and an emotional intimacy he hadn't felt from her in months. As he read through their exchanges, anger and betrayal washed over him in waves. It wasn't just about Jason. It was the realization that Amanda had shared pieces of herself with another man, pieces that he had once cherished as uniquely theirs. When Amanda returned home that evening, Michael was waiting in the living room, her laptop open on the coffee table. "We need to talk," he said, his voice calm but with an edge sharp enough to cut glass. Amanda's heart sank as she took in the scene. She had known this moment might come, but she hadn't prepared for how it would feel to stand in front of Michael and see the hurt etched into his face. "I found the emails," he said simply, holding her gaze. "All of them." Amanda's breath caught in her throat, her stomach churning. "Michael, Why?" Michael interrupted, his voice breaking. "Why would you do this to us? To me?" She sank onto the couch, her hands trembling. "I don't know how to explain it," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I felt so lost, so disconnected. And Jason, he made me feel like I mattered again." Michael laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "You think I don't see you? You think I don't care? I've been here, Amanda, every step of the way. But you checked out a long time ago." The truth of his words stung, but Amanda couldn't bring herself to argue. She had checked out, maybe not intentionally, but the distance between them had been growing for years. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice trembling. Michael leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "That's up to you," he said finally. "But I'm not going to sit around and watch my marriage fall apart. You need to decide what you want, Amanda, him or me." Meanwhile, Jason was grappling with his own inner turmoil. He had hoped that Amanda's confession to Michael would bring clarity to their situation, but instead, it had only added to the uncertainty. He found himself oscillating between hope and doubt, unsure whether Amanda would choose him or retreat back into the safety of her marriage. One evening, Jason decided he couldn't wait any longer. He sent Amanda a text, asking to meet. When she agreed, they chose a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town, a place where they could talk without fear of being seen. As Amanda walked into the cafe, Jason's heart raced. She looked tired, her face pale and her eyes heavy with emotion, but she still took his breath away. He stood to greet her, and they sat down at a secluded table in the corner. "I needed to see you," Jason said, his voice soft but firm. "I feel like we're both stuck in this limbo, and I need to know where we stand." Amanda stared down at her coffee cup, her hands wrapped around it like a lifeline. "I don't know what to do," she admitted. "Michael knows about us. He's hurt, and I don't know if I can leave him like this." Jason reached across the table and took her hand, his touch grounding her. "Amanda, I don't want to pressure you," he said, "but I need to know if there's a chance for us. If you want to be with me, I'll fight for you. But if you don't, I need to walk away." Tears welled in Amanda's eyes as she looked at him, her heart breaking under the weight of the decision she had to make. "I care about you, Jason," she said, her voice trembling, "but I need more time." Jason nodded, his expression pained but understanding. "Take all the time you need," he said. "Just promise me you'll be honest. With me, with Michael, and with yourself." As they parted ways, Amanda felt a flicker of clarity amid the chaos. She knew she couldn't keep stringing both men along, but the thought of choosing one and losing the other felt like an impossible task. The tension reached a boiling point one night when Michael, fueled by a combination of anger and desperation, decided to confront Jason directly. He had pieced together enough information from Amanda's emails and texts to figure out where Jason worked, and he showed up at the office unannounced. Jason was sitting at his desk, going over paperwork, when Michael stormed in. The room fell silent as their eyes locked, the air thick with unspoken animosity. "Michael," Jason said, standing up, "I wasn't expecting you." "Cut the crap," Michael snapped. "You've been sleeping with my wife." Jason held up his hands in a placating gesture. "It's not like that," he said. "I care about Amanda, but nothing's happened, at least not physically." "Don't insult my intelligence," Michael growled, stepping closer. "You think I don't see what's going on? You're trying to steal her from me." "I'm not trying to steal anyone," Jason said, his voice calm but firm. "Amanda is her own person. She has to make her own choice." Michael's fists clenched at his sides, and for a moment, Jason thought he might throw a punch. But instead, Michael took a step back, his anger giving way to frustration. "You don't get it, do you?" Michael said, his voice cracking. "She's my wife. We built a life together, and I'm not going to let you take that away from me." Jason met his gaze, his expression unwavering. "I understand how you feel," he said, "but this isn't about you or me. It's about Amanda, and she deserves to be happy, even if that means staying with you." Michael stared at him for a long moment, then turned and walked away without another word. Jason sank back into his chair, his heart pounding. He knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. Back at home, Amanda sat alone in the living room, staring at the wedding photo on the mantel. She felt like she was being torn in two, each side pulling her in a different direction. Michael had been her partner for so many years, but their relationship felt like a shadow of what it once was. And Jason represented everything she had been missing: passion, excitement, and a sense of being truly seen. As the clock struck midnight, Amanda made a decision. She picked up her phone and dialed Jason's number. When he answered, his voice warm and hopeful, she said, "We need to talk. Tomorrow. In person." Jason agreed, and as Amanda hung up the phone, she felt a strange mixture of relief and dread. The moment of truth was approaching, and there was no turning back. Stay tuned for the next chapter as Amanda's decision sets off a chain of events that will change everything. If you're enjoying the story so far, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more captivating recaps like this one. The morning air was thick with tension as Amanda parked her car outside a small cafe on the edge of town. She had barely slept the night before, her mind racing with questions and doubts. Today was the day she would face Jason and try to sort through the tangled mess of emotions and decisions that had overtaken her life. Her stomach churned as she walked through the cafe's door, the bell above it jingling softly. Jason was already seated at a corner table, his hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. When he saw her, his face lit up with a small, hopeful smile. But as Amanda sat down across from him, her expression told a different story, one of exhaustion and inner conflict. "Thanks for meeting me," Amanda began, her voice barely above a whisper. Jason nodded, his gaze searching hers. "Of course. I've been waiting to hear from you." Amanda took a deep breath, her fingers nervously tracing the edge of her coffee cup. "I've been thinking a lot about everything, about us, about Michael. I need to be honest with you." Jason's heart sank at her words. He had braced himself for this moment, but the reality of it was harder than he had imagined. "Whatever you need to say, I'll listen," he said softly. Amanda hesitated, then began to speak. "You've been such an important part of my life these past few months. You've made me feel things I haven't felt in years. But I can't just walk away from Michael. I can't leave behind everything we've built together." Jason's grip tightened on his mug, his knuckles turning white. "So, that's it? You're staying with him?" "I don't know," Amanda admitted, her voice cracking. I need more time to figure out what's right. For me, for Michael, for everyone." Jason leaned back in his chair, his face a mask of disappointment. "I understand, Amanda, but I can't keep waiting forever. At some point, you have to choose." Amanda nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "I know, and I will. I promise." The conversation ended with a sense of finality that left both of them reeling. As Amanda walked back to her car, she felt an overwhelming sense of loss, as if she were being pulled in two directions and would inevitably lose something precious no matter which path she chose. Back at home, Michael was also grappling with his own inner turmoil. The confrontation with Jason had left him shaken, not because of Jason's words, but because of the truth they carried. For years, Michael had been coasting through their marriage, assuming that their bond was unbreakable. Now, he was faced with the harsh reality that he had taken Amanda for granted. Determined to fight for his marriage, Michael decided to take action. That evening, he planned a surprise dinner for Amanda. He spent hours preparing her favorite meal, setting the table with candles and flowers in an effort to recreate the romance they had lost. When Amanda walked through the door that evening, she was met with the sight of Michael standing in the kitchen, an apron tied around his waist and a sheepish smile on his face. "What's all this?" she asked, her surprise evident. "I thought we could use a night to just be together," Michael said, his voice laced with vulnerability. "No distractions, no arguments. Just us." Amanda's heart softened at his words, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a glimmer of hope. They sat down to dinner, and as they talked, they began to remember the things that had brought them together in the first place. Michael shared stories from work. Amanda talked about her plans for the weekend, and for a few hours, it felt as though the weight of their troubles had lifted. But just as the evening was drawing to a close, Michael couldn't hold back any longer. "Amanda," he said, his voice trembling, "I know things haven't been easy lately, and I know I've made mistakes, but I want you to know that I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix this." Amanda looked down at her hands, her emotions swirling. "I appreciate that, Michael," she said quietly. "But fixing this isn't just about you. It's about me too. I need to figure out what I want, who I am." Michael reached across the table and took her hand. "Then let's figure it out together. Please, Amanda, don't give up on us." Amanda met his gaze, and for a moment, she felt the spark of the love they had once shared. But the shadow of her connection to Jason lingered, and she knew that her heart was still divided. As the days turned into weeks, the tension between Amanda, Michael, and Jason reached a breaking point. Jason, growing tired of waiting, decided to confront Amanda one last time. He showed up at her workplace unannounced, pulling her aside into an empty conference room. "This can't keep going on," Jason said, his voice tinged with frustration. "You have to make a choice, Amanda. I can't keep living like this, wondering if you're going to walk away or stay. Amanda looked at him, her eyes filled with guilt. I know, Jason. I'm sorry for putting you in this position. But I don't know what to do. Jason took a step closer, his voice softening. You know how I feel about you. I'm not perfect, but I'm here. I want to be with you, but I need to know if you feel the same. Amanda hesitated, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. I care about you, Jason, she said finally, but I can't make this decision lightly. There's so much at stake. Jason's expression hardened, a mix of hurt and anger flashing in his eyes. And what about me? Don't I matter? Or am I just a convenient escape for you? His words cut deep, and Amanda felt tears streaming down her face. That's not fair, she said, her voice trembling. You mean so much to me, but I have a life with Michael, a history. I can't just throw that away. Jason stepped back, his face a mask of resignation. I guess that's your answer then. As he walked out of the room, Amanda felt a sense of finality that left her breathless. She had lost Jason, but she wasn't sure if she could save what she had with Michael, and for the first time she wondered if she might end up losing them both. Meanwhile, Michael, sensing Amanda's continued distance, decided to take matters into his own hands. He reached out to a marriage counselor, hoping that professional guidance could help them find their way back to each other. When he brought up the idea to Amanda, she was hesitant at first, but eventually agreed. Their first counseling session was raw and emotional. Michael admitted to the ways he had neglected their relationship, while Amanda opened up about the loneliness and dissatisfaction that had driven her to Jason. It was painful for both of them, but also cathartic, as they began to unravel the issues that had brought them to this point. But even as they worked to rebuild their connection, Amanda couldn't shake the memory of Jason, the way he had looked at her, the way he had made her feel. And deep down, she knew that she couldn't fully commit to saving her marriage until she confronted those feelings once and for all. The next chapter will bring Amanda to a crossroads that will define the future for everyone involved. If you're captivated by this unfolding drama, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for the next part of the story. The tension in Amanda's life had reached a boiling point. Every interaction felt like walking a tightrope, with emotions stretched so thin they threatened to snap at any moment. At home, Michael oscillated between trying to win her back with grand gestures and retreating into icy silence, leaving Amanda feeling both smothered and abandoned. Meanwhile, Jason had stopped reaching out, leaving a void she hadn't expected to feel so deeply. The days dragged on, and Amanda realized she couldn't go on like this. Something had to give. One afternoon, as Amanda sorted through a pile of unopened mail at the kitchen table, she came across an envelope addressed to her in Jason's handwriting. Her heart leapt into her throat as she tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a letter scrawled in his familiar handwriting. Amanda, I know I said I wouldn't wait forever, but I also know how hard this has been for you. I can't pretend that I don't want you in my life, but I also can't keep holding my breath, waiting for something that might never happen. You've always said you need time to figure things out, and I respect that. But I need closure too. I'll be at our spot by the lake on Saturday evening. If you want to talk, I'll be there. If not, I'll understand. Whatever happens, I hope you find what you're looking for. Always, Jason. Amanda's hands trembled as she reread the letter. Their spot by the lake, where they'd shared their first kiss, where they'd spent stolen afternoons wrapped in each other's arms. The thought of going to meet him filled her with both anticipation and dread. She knew that meeting Jason could mean the end of her marriage, but not going could mean losing him forever. On Saturday morning, Michael surprised Amanda by announcing that he had planned a special day for them. Just us, he said, his tone almost pleading. I thought we could go hiking, maybe have a picnic, get away from everything for a while. Amanda hesitated. She hadn't told Michael about Jason's letter, and the weight of the secret pressed heavily on her chest. That sounds nice, she said, forcing a smile. As they packed up their things and headed out, Amanda felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this could be the start of something new for them. Maybe she could let go of Jason and focus on rebuilding what she and Michael once had. The hike was beautiful. the trail winding through a dense forest before opening up to a stunning overlook. Michael was unusually attentive, pointing out wildflowers and helping her over rocky patches. For a moment, Amanda allowed herself to imagine that they could find their way back to each other. But as they sat down to eat their picnic, Michael's demeanor shifted. "Amanda," he began, his voice heavy, "I know things haven't been easy between us, and I know you've been distant." Amanda froze, her sandwich halfway to her mouth. "Michael, let me finish," he said, cutting her off. "I've been trying to be patient, to give you the space you need. But I can't keep pretending that everything is fine. I know about Jason." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Amanda's heart pounded in her chest. "What do you mean, you know?" Michael looked her in the eye, his expression a mix of hurt and determination. "I know you've been seeing him. I don't know all the details, but I know enough. And I need to know the truth, Amanda. Are you in love with him?" Tears sprang to Amanda's eyes as she struggled to find the words. "Michael, I don't know. I care about him, but I care about you too. I'm so confused." Michael's face hardened. "Confused isn't an answer. I need to know if you're willing to fight for us, or if I've already lost you." Amanda looked away, unable to meet his gaze. "I don't know what I want," she whispered. Michael's shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him. "Then I don't know what we're even doing anymore." The rest of the hike was tense and silent, the earlier sense of hope completely shattered. By the time they got home, Amanda felt emotionally drained. As Michael retreated to his office, Amanda found herself pacing the living room, Jason's letter burning a hole in her pocket. That evening, as the sun dipped low in the sky, Amanda found herself driving toward the lake. Her mind raced with doubts and fears, but something inside her compelled her to go. She needed to see Jason, to hear his voice, to find some kind of clarity in the chaos. When she arrived, Jason was already there, sitting on a weathered bench overlooking the water. He looked up as she approached, his expression unreadable. "You came," he said softly. Amanda nodded, her throat too tight to speak. She sat down beside him, the silence between them heavy with unspoken words. "I wasn't sure if you would," Jason said after a while, "but I'm glad you did." Amanda stared out at the water, the surface reflecting the fiery hues of the sunset. "Jason, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I feel like I'm being torn in two." Jason turned to her, his eyes filled with a mixture of hope and sadness. "I get that, but I need to know if there's a part of you that wants to be with me. Not out of guilt, not because you're unhappy with Michael, but because you love me." Amanda's breath caught in her throat. "I do care about you, Jason, more than I ever thought I could. But I can't just walk away from my marriage. I can't make that kind of decision without knowing for sure." Jason nodded, his jaw tightening. "I understand, but I can't keep living in limbo, Amanda. If you're going to stay with Michael, I need to know now. Otherwise, I'll walk away and let you figure things out on your own." Tears streamed down Amanda's face as she grappled with the weight of his words. She wanted to tell Jason to stay, to promise him that they could build a life together. But the thought of leaving Michael, of breaking the vows they had made, was too much to bear. "I can't give you an answer tonight," she said finally. "I'm sorry, Jason. I need more time." Jason's face fell, and for a moment, Amanda thought he might leave right then and there. But instead, he reached out and took her hand. "Take the time you need," he said quietly. "But don't take forever." As Amanda drove home, her mind was a whirlwind of emotions. She knew she couldn't keep dragging this out, but no matter which choice she made, someone would end up hurt. And for the first time, she realized that someone might be herself. The stage is set for a final confrontation that will determine the future for Amanda, Michael, and Jason. If you're invested in this gripping drama, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to follow the story to its powerful conclusion. The final showdown came on an otherwise unremarkable Tuesday evening. Amanda found herself at a crossroads, figuratively and literally, as she drove home from work. Michael's recent silence had been deafening. his once fervent attempts to repair their marriage fading into a resigned coldness. Meanwhile, Jason had kept his word, stepping back to give Amanda the space she had asked for, even if it had clearly broken his heart. She pulled into the driveway, the house looming before her like a monument to everything she was about to lose or fight for. Inside, the faint hum of the television filled the air. Michael sat in the living room, staring blankly at the screen, though it was clear his mind was elsewhere. "Michael," Amanda said, her voice steady but low, "we need to talk." He muted the TV and turned to her, his expression unreadable. "I figured this was coming." Amanda sat down across from him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she began. "About us. About what went wrong." Michael raised an eyebrow. What went wrong or who? The accusation stung, but Amanda nodded, accepting the truth in his words. "Both," she admitted. "I made mistakes, Michael. Big ones. I got caught up in something that made me feel seen, needed. But it doesn't excuse what I did to you." Michael leaned back, folding his arms. "So what now? Do you want me to just forgive you and pretend like nothing happened?" Amanda shook her head. "No, I don't think we can go back to how things were. But I also know I don't want to walk away from this without trying to fix it." Michael's eyes softened, though skepticism lingered in his expression. "And Jason?" Amanda's chest tightened at the mention of his name. "I told him I needed time to figure things out, and I think I have. He gave me something I was missing, Michael, but it wasn't real. Not in the way what we had was real." Michael studied her, his gaze searching for any hint of deception. "Do you still love him?" Amanda hesitated, the weight of the question bearing down on her. "I think I was in love with the idea of him, but what I really want is to find a way back to us. If that's even possible." Michael sighed, rubbing his temples. "You can't just snap your fingers and fix something like this, Amanda. Trust doesn't come back overnight." "I know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But if there's any part of you that thinks we can rebuild, I'm willing to do whatever it takes." The room fell into a heavy silence, the air between them thick with years of unspoken pain and hope. Finally, Michael nodded, though his expression remained guarded. "It's not going to be easy for either of us." Amanda managed a small, tentative smile. "I'm not asking for easy, just a chance." The next day, Amanda wrote Jason a letter, a decision that felt both cathartic and final. She poured her heart onto the page, thanking him for the way he had opened her eyes to the parts of herself she'd been neglecting. But she also made it clear that she had chosen to try to repair her marriage, and she asked for his understanding, even if she didn't deserve it. She drove to the lake, their spot, and left the letter beneath the bench where they'd last spoken. It felt poetic in a way, a goodbye where their story had begun. As she walked back to her car, she allowed herself one final glance at the water, a pang of bittersweet emotion catching her off guard. Sometimes, love wasn't enough to make something last, and sometimes that was okay. Over the following weeks, Amanda and Michael began the slow, painful process of rebuilding their relationship. They attended therapy together, where they unpacked years of miscommunication and resentment. Michael admitted that his workaholic tendencies had left Amanda feeling invisible, while Amanda owned up to the emotional void she had filled with Jason. It wasn't perfect. Some days were harder than others, and there were moments when it felt like the weight of their history might crush them. But they also rediscovered the things that had drawn them together in the first place. Shared laughter, inside jokes, and a deep-seated respect for the life they had built. One Saturday morning, Michael surprised Amanda by suggesting they repaint the living room, a project they'd been putting off for years. As they worked side by side, splattered with paint and teasing each other about their lack of DIY skills, Amanda felt a glimmer of something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. As for Jason, he read Amanda's letter in the quiet solitude of the lake, the setting sun casting a warm glow over the water. Her words were honest and raw, and though they broke his heart, they also gave him closure. He folded the letter carefully, placing it in his jacket pocket, and sat for a long time, watching the ripples on the surface of the lake. Eventually, he stood, his silhouette strong against the fading light. He had loved Amanda, and perhaps a part of him always would. But he knew now that his path lay elsewhere, and he resolved to move forward with an open heart. Months later, Amanda and Michael hosted a small dinner party for their closest friends, a celebration of their renewed commitment to each other. As the evening wore on, Amanda looked around the room, her heart swelling with gratitude. The journey had been messy and painful, but it had also taught her the value of honesty, resilience, and forgiveness. That night, as she and Michael sat together on the porch, watching the stars, Amanda reached for his hand. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" he asked, turning to her. "For not giving up on us," she replied. "Even when I almost did." Michael squeezed her hand, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "We're a work in progress, Amanda, but I think we're worth it." Amanda nodded, a sense of peace settling over her. "I think so too." And with that, the stars above seemed to shine a little brighter, their light a quiet reminder that even in the darkest moments, there was always a chance for redemption. Thank you for sticking with me through this emotional journey. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more captivating tales. See you in the next video.